The Dominion of stellar supremacy operated under the charming delusion that oppression could be refined into an art form, complete with proper paperwork and ceremonial flourishes. For 2.5 centuries, they had perfected the bureaucratic approach to galactic domination. Why simply conquer worlds when you could trap them in endless administrative procedures, submission rituals, and protective partnership agreements that made old-fashioned tyranny look refreshingly honest? Lord Commander ZYX Ironbane presided over this theatrical empire from his mobile fortress, the aptly named Inevitable Conquest, a ship so absurdly large that it required its own postal system and had weather patterns in the lower decks. The vessel drifted between star systems like a predatory bureaucrat, collecting tribute, conducting ceremonies, and generally making life miserable for anyone unlucky enough to fall under the Dominion's protection. Ironbane himself was a product of the Dominion's Trial of Supremacy, a ritualistic tournament where ambitious aliens beat each other senseless until only one remained conscious enough to fill out the necessary forms for leadership. Standing 9 feet tall with chitinous plates covering most of his body and mandibles that clicked when he spoke, he looked like someone had crossbred a mantis with a filing cabinet and given it delusions of grandeur. The Dominion's approach to subjugation was elegantly simple. Newly contacted civilizations were offered the choice between voluntary participation in their protective structure or involuntary participation preceded by orbital bombardment. Most species, demonstrating the survival instincts that had gotten them to space in the first place, chose the voluntary option. This led to the signing of lengthy contracts filled with subsections, addendums, and clauses that essentially boiled down to "we own you now, but politely." The current stop on Ironbane's grand tour of intimidation was a recently contacted system whose third planet had somehow produced a species called humans. The initial survey reports had described them as moderately aggressive bipeds with concerning tendencies toward violence and bureaucracy. This combination had intrigued Dominion strategists, who appreciated species that understood both conflict and paperwork. Commander NYX Blackthorne stood in the docking bay of the Inevitable Conquest, reviewing her mission briefing with the enthusiasm of someone volunteering to be fed to hungry space sharks. Earth's Combined Military Command had selected her for this assignment based on what they diplomatically termed her comprehensive combat experience, which was political speak, for she used to win underground fights for money before joining the space service. Her background was unconventional even by Earth standards. Before humanity had stumbled into galactic politics, NYX had dominated the illegal fighting circuits of the outer colonies, earning a reputation for ending matches quickly and decisively. When Earth's military desperately needed officers who understood both violence and negotiation, her unique qualifications had suddenly become valuable rather than merely criminal. The interior of the Dominion flagship resembled what might happen if someone gave unlimited resources to a committee of interior designers suffering from severe megalomania. Everything was oversized, overdecorated, and completely impractical. Corridors wide enough to accommodate small aircraft led to chambers that could house small cities, all decorated in a style that could charitably be described as intimidating baroque. Alien courtiers filled these spaces like exotic furniture, their various appendages twitching with barely contained excitement at the prospect of witnessing another species' ritual humiliation. The Dominion had collected representatives from dozens of worlds, creating a mobile menagerie of subjugated civilizations that served as both entertainment and cautionary examples. NYX was escorted through this maze of excess by a protocol droid whose voice carried the kind of artificial cheerfulness typically reserved for automated customer service systems and interrogation devices. "Welcome to the Inevitable Conquest, Representative Blackthorne. Your participation in today's Acknowledgement of Natural Order ceremony is greatly anticipated by His Magnificence and the assembled diplomatic corps." The ceremony itself would take place on the ship's arena deck, a massive circular chamber designed to showcase the Dominion's power while providing optimal viewing angles for the assembled spectators. This was where new species formally acknowledged their place in the galactic hierarchy through a ritual that combined elements of theater, diplomacy, and mild violence. "The procedure is quite straightforward," the droid continued with mechanical enthusiasm. "His Magnificence will deliver the traditional address explaining your species' new position within the Dominion's protective structure. You will then demonstrate proper understanding by accepting the ceremonial strike of recognition. This serves to establish the natural order while providing an educational experience for all present." NYX nodded politely while internally translating this diplomatic doublespeak. She was expected to stand there while an alien bully slapped her in front of an audience, presumably to demonstrate humanity's acceptance of inferior status. The briefing materials had mentioned this possibility, though Earth's diplomatic corps had hoped the intelligence reports were exaggerated. Apparently, they weren't. The arena deck buzzed with activity as representatives from various subjugated species took their assigned positions in the viewing galleries. NYX noted the careful segregation. Newer conquests sat closer to the arena floor, where they could get optimal views of the proceedings, while older, more integrated species occupied higher tiers that suggested their education was complete. Lord Commander Ironbane made his entrance with the theatrical flair of someone who had never encountered a dramatic gesture he didn't like. The massive doors at the arena's far end opened to reveal him striding through a corridor of ceremonial guards, his chitinous plates gleaming under the artificial lighting. His mandibles clicked in what might have been satisfaction or digestive activity. Alien facial expressions were challenging to interpret. Behold! His voice boomed across the arena through amplification systems that made him sound like an angry god with microphone feedback. Another primitive world seeks the protection and guidance of the Dominion. Another species learns the wisdom of accepting their proper place in the natural order. The assembled aliens responded with what passed for applause among their various species, a cacophony of clicks, whistles, tentacle slapping, and sounds that defied description. NYX stood in the center of the arena, noting that the acoustics were designed to make the spectator noise overwhelming while ensuring the central figure felt properly isolated. Ironbane descended from his elevated platform with measured steps, each footfall echoing dramatically in the vast space. His forearms moved in synchronized gestures that were probably meant to convey majesty, but mostly suggested someone conducting an orchestra of invisible musicians having seizures. The species known as humans, he continued, has demonstrated the intelligence to accept voluntary integration into our protective framework. This wisdom shall be acknowledged through the traditional ceremony, observed by representatives of 43 worlds who have already learned the benefits of Dominion guidance. NYX remained silent, though her jaw tightened imperceptibly. The briefing had prepared her for this moment, but actually experiencing the casual arrogance was something else entirely. Around the arena, she could see other species representatives watching with expressions that ranged from sympathetic to curious to bored. This was apparently routine entertainment for them. The acknowledgement of natural order, Ironbane intoned, now standing directly before her, serves multiple purposes. It demonstrates acceptance, provides educational value for newer members of our community, and maintains the proper hierarchy that ensures galactic peace and prosperity. He raised his primary right arm, and NYX noticed that his hand was roughly the size of a dinner plate and looked about as gentle. The strike of recognition was clearly not intended to cause serious injury. The Dominion preferred their subjects conscious and capable of signing documents, but it would definitely leave an impression. Do you, representative of the human species, acknowledge the Dominion's authority and accept your world's position within our protective structure? NYX looked up at the towering alien lord, then around at the assembled representatives of dozens of conquered worlds, then back at Ironbane. The moment stretched like a held breath, and she could feel the weight of expectation from hundreds of eyes. You know, she said conversationally, where I come from, we have a saying about people who think they need to hit others to prove they are in charge. Ironbane's mandibles clicked in what might have been confusion. What saying is that? They usually can't take a punch themselves. The strike of recognition caught NYX across her right cheek with enough force to spin her halfway around and drop her to one knee. The arena erupted in the alien equivalent of satisfied murmuring, another species properly educated about their place in the cosmic order. NYX tasted blood and felt her cheek beginning to swell. The rational part of her mind noted that she should probably stay down, complete the ceremony, and return to Earth with whatever agreement the Dominion offered. Her homeworld needed this treaty, even if it came with a side order of ritual humiliation. The irrational part of her mind, however, was reminding her that she had never, not once in over 100 professional fights, stayed down after taking a hit. NYX rose slowly, turning to face Lord Commander Ironbane. Her right eye was already beginning to close, but her left eye burned with an intensity that made several nearby spectators suddenly develop urgent interest in examining their appendages. "That's an interesting technique," she said, rolling her shoulders and settling into a fighting stance that had served her well in underground combat rings across 3-star systems. "My turn." Ironbane's expression suggested he was experiencing the alien equivalent of a system error. "What did you say?" "I said it's my turn," NYX repeated, bouncing lightly on the balls of her feet. "See, humans have our own ceremony. We call it if you hit me, I hit you back harder." The Lord Commander's laugh was genuinely amused, a sound like grinding metal with pretensions. "You? Strike me? Little human, I have conquered species that could tear your primitive warriors apart with minimal effort. I have personally defeated creatures that..." NYX's left hook caught him directly in what passed for his solar plexus with the full force of human desperation, Earth gravity conditioning, and 15 years of professional violence behind it. The impact made a sound like someone dropping a bag of cement from a significant height, which was essentially accurate given the physics involved. Lord Commander ZYX Thak Ironbane, supreme authority of the Dominion of Stellar Supremacy, conqueror of 43 worlds, and self-proclaimed master of natural order, went down like a felled tree in a controlled demolition. The silence that followed was the kind typically reserved for moments when the fundamental laws of reality required emergency maintenance. Every alien in the arena remained frozen in perfect stillness, as if moving might somehow make the impossible thing they had just witnessed more real. NYX stood over the fallen Lord Commander, flexing her knuckles and noting with professional satisfaction that her form had remained solid despite the unusual circumstances. "And that," she said calmly to the stunned audience, "is how humans acknowledge natural order." The arena remained locked in stunned paralysis until one of Ironbane's advisors, a tentacled creature that looked like it had been designed by a committee of nightmares, made a sound like a deflating balloon animal. This seemed to break whatever spell was holding everyone motionless. Ironbane groaned and attempted to rise, his forearms working at cross purposes as his brain tried to process what had just occurred. "Gods," he wheezed, though the effect was somewhat diminished by his prone position and the fact that his voice had risen several octaves. "Seize the primitive." NYX raised an eyebrow as armored Dominion soldiers began moving toward her with the enthusiasm of people approaching an unexploded nuclear device. "I wouldn't recommend that," she said conversationally. "Because here's something your intelligence reports probably missed about humans. We're really, really good at violence, and we tend to take things like unprovoked attacks personally." This was, technically, a significant exaggeration. Earth's military was impressive by local standards, but hardly capable of challenging the Dominion's fleet. However, NYX had learned that in both combat and diplomacy, confidence could be more valuable than actual capability. "Besides," she continued, "your own rules just proved my point. The ceremony is about acknowledging natural order through demonstrations of strength, right? Well, I'm conscious and you're admiring the ceiling. What does that say about the natural order around here?" Ironbane finally managed to sit up, his hand gingerly probing what might have been ribs or possibly some other internal structure entirely. His eyes focused on NYX with an expression that combined pain, confusion, and the dawning realization that his worldview had just suffered catastrophic structural damage. You dare challenge the authority of the Dominion?" "I'm not challenging anything," NYX replied. "I'm just pointing out that your ceremony worked exactly as advertised. The stronger individual demonstrated dominance over the weaker one. The only problem is that you assumed you were the stronger one." Around the arena, the assembled representatives were engaged in hurried conversations in dozens of different languages. NYX was reasonably certain the topic wasn't the arena's impressive acoustics. "Now," she continued, "Earth would like to discuss a mutual cooperation agreement between equals. We're not interested in joining your protection racket, but we're perfectly happy to coexist peacefully. No ceremonies, no strikes of recognition, no bureaucratic subjugation disguised as partnership agreements." Equals. Ironbane struggled to his feet, though he remained noticeably hunched over. "You think one fortunate blow makes your species equal to the Dominion?" NYX shrugged. I think the fact that you're still recovering from my fortunate blow while I'm standing here negotiating suggests that equality might be worth reconsidering. But if you'd like to test the theory further, I'm happy to provide additional demonstrations. She settled back into her fighting stance, and NYX was pleased to see the Lord Commander take an involuntary step backward. The standoff stretched for several heartbeats until an elderly advisor approached with the careful movements of someone navigating a minefield during an earthquake. "Your Magnificence," the creature whispered urgently. "Perhaps alternative approaches might be considered." Ironbane's pride battled visibly with his newly acquired understanding of human punching capacity and his growing awareness that hundreds of representatives from subjugated worlds were watching his every move. "The Dominion," he said finally, his voice tight with barely-controlled rage, "has always been flexible in its approach to exceptional circumstances." NYX nodded gravely. "That's very progressive of you, Your Magnificence. I'm sure Earth's leadership will appreciate the Dominion's enlightened attitude toward interspecies relations." The negotiations that followed were unlike anything in the Dominion's recorded history. Where other species had accepted whatever terms were offered, NYX sat across from Imperial officials and calmly discussed conditions as if she represented an equal power. Where others had signed whatever documents were placed before them, she actually read the contracts and demanded modifications. Most remarkably, it worked. Within 8 hours, NYX had secured Earth's recognition as an independent world, exempt from protection fees and free to develop its own policies. The agreement included provisions for trade relationships, technological exchange, and a carefully worded clause ensuring that any future ceremonial interactions would be conducted on a strictly voluntary basis. The other species representatives observed these proceedings with the fascination of creatures witnessing a fundamental law of physics being repealed. Several began requesting private meetings with NYX, ostensibly to discuss trade opportunities but actually to ask variations of "How did you manage that? And could you teach our people?" As NYX prepared to depart the inevitable conquest, she was escorted by a considerably more respectful honor guard than had greeted her arrival. Lord Commander Ironbane was conspicuously absent from the farewell ceremony, citing urgent administrative duties that certainly had nothing to do with avoiding public appearances while sporting spectacular facial bruising. The journey back to Earth provided NYX with time to reflect on the day's events. She had expected to participate in a humiliating submission ritual, and instead had fundamentally altered the balance of galactic power with a single punch. The implications would ripple across Dominion space for generations. 6 months later, reports began filtering in from across the Dominion's territory. The crystalline Etherians had politely declined to renew their protection agreement, citing budgetary constraints. The aquatic depth dwellers had requested renegotiation of their submission terms, demanding reciprocal benefits for their continued cooperation. 24 other species had begun referring to their tribute payments as voluntary contributions and expecting actual services in return. Lord Commander Ironbane's response was to issue increasingly desperate proclamations about natural order and the consequences of defying established authority. However, these declarations notably avoided any mention of ceremonial demonstrations or physical acknowledgments of hierarchy. The galaxy's academic community had a field day analyzing what became known as the Terran paradigm shift. University dissertations examined the psychological impact of perceived invincibility versus demonstrated vulnerability. Military colleges debated whether human combat effectiveness had been systematically underestimated or whether Commander Blackthorne represented an exceptional case study. NYX herself found her role as Earth's primary diplomatic representative significantly expanded, though her job description had evolved in interesting directions. She was frequently called upon to resolve disputes through what became known as direct consultation, a euphemism that fooled nobody but made the official reports more palatable. Earth's position in galactic affairs underwent a complete transformation. Trade opportunities materialized from previously unknown sources. Defensive alliances emerged with species seeking alternatives to Dominion protection, and humanity's technological development accelerated as various civilizations decided that friendship with Earth might be preferable to potential conflict. The supreme irony, NYX often reflected, was that the Dominion's own philosophy had enabled her success. They had constructed their entire power structure around the principle that strength determined authority, creating a system where anyone capable of demonstrating superior force could claim superior position. They had simply never considered that someone might be both willing and able to test that principle directly. In quiet moments between diplomatic crises, NYX sometimes wondered what would have happened if she had simply accepted the strike of recognition, completed the ceremony, and returned to Earth with whatever scraps the Dominion chose to offer. Humanity would have become just another client species, paying tribute and accepting guidance from their benevolent overlords. Instead, she had trusted in 15 years of professional violence and the fundamental human conviction that respect was something you earned rather than something you demanded. The galaxy was still adjusting to this new reality, a universe where a single human woman had redefined interspecies relations by refusing to accept someone else's definition of natural order. It was, NYX thought, probably the most expensive education in applied diplomacy the Dominion had ever received. And judging by the complete absence of ceremonial violence in her subsequent diplomatic encounters, it appeared to be a lesson that had been thoroughly internalized.